Well, with all this UFO excitement, I think as it's public holiday Monday here in Australia, I'll just have a quick look at some of this stuff. Now, this is this is George Knapp, the chap responsible for peddling all the Bob Lazar science fiction. Now, these images here, they're saying these are definitely UFOs. So if you just look at it, something hanging down here, big silver ball, looking straight up, I would say, and pretty much the same thing. This one here could be a collapsing balloon. Could be one of these, but it's just collapsing because they get to a certain height and they burst and then they just fall. Now, there was something called, and I don't know if it's still going actually, but there was something called Project Loon, which was something to do with Google, and it was something to do with lots and lots and lots of stratospheric balloons to provide Wi-Fi and internet and all that sort of stuff. Now, I'll leave a link below to Project Loon, but we can have a look at a loon balloon. There's a loon balloon. Does look rather similar, doesn't it? You'd have to say that does look similar. And if we, I mean, even with the bit hanging underneath, I mean, it's very, very similar. And of course, a terrestrial explanation is always going to be the more likely. There's another one of these things. Got the solar panels underneath. Of course, at a distance, this just looks like a little thing underneath, which is what we saw on that first image. A couple of guys standing by one of these things. One taking off, presumably, because as they get higher, they get bigger and bigger because the air pressure gets lower and lower. So the pressure inside makes them expand, and they take on the more flying saucer sort of shape. Now this is showing the tracks of some of these things, and as you can see, they do spend a lot of their time over the ocean. Now I can't get any historical data for when these stealth ships were buzzed by these things. Or these things swarmed around these ships off of the coast of California up here. But if these things are floating around a lot over the ocean, these balloons, I think these are a pretty good fit for what we're seeing. Now there's one here, obviously this one's gone up to California, maybe it was launched in California. It's come down here, spent a lot of time around here. Another one from here, launched from Florida by the look of it. Actually no, that's that little thing there's Florida, isn't it? This is Cuba and the Caribbean down here. Flies down here, floats off down here, and then floats right off down here, heading for Australia. And I think there was I saw somewhere there's something like 80 of these things floating around. So I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that these loon balloons are going to be the culprits, especially when you take into account the where's George Knapp gone? There he is. Especially when you take into account the similarity of the appearance of these things. And the radar tracks on the Navy boats, they're getting all excited about it accelerating to 138 knots. Well, balloons accelerate to 138 knots if that's what the jet stream is speeding them up. They said that they couldn't tell if it had left the radar because it was low or high, because the radar has a certain beam width, and they can't tell whether the thing's floated above it, flown above it, or descended below it. So, you know, balloons tend to ascend most of the time, don't they? Get up to a certain height and they float around, so I would say these things are a pretty good fit. And the other thing too is, you know, the Master Chief was saying on the Princeton, I think it was, that these things were there and they were 128 knots. See, none of this is spectacular speed, and none of the radar tracks are showing spectacular motion. So I really don't think what they're looking at is extraterrestrial, and I think it's really quite scary that they're getting excited over this sort of thing when I think it's pretty obvious these are balloons. I mean, how much research do these people actually do into this stuff? Because, I mean, literally, how long is this video? 5 minutes long, and I probably spent 10 minutes looking at the internet before making this video. So, with 15 minutes worth of research, we've got a pretty good fit. And as I say, I reckon that with the historical data, when you consider some of these tracks that we've seen, these tracks over the ocean, who's to say that when they were actually doing their military exercise, that there was this sort of there wasn't this sort of activity right over where the warships were, off of the west coast of the United States, or even off the east coast of the United States, wherever this was. How do we know? It's just not these balloons floating around. Certainly the speed suggests balloons, doesn't it? Because whatever they're tracking isn't fast. The Master Chief was showing things on his screen that were doing 128 knots. Just now the Navy were getting excited because it was accelerating to 138 knots. Hang on, I might just be able to get that on the George Knapp thing. We go back to the beginning here and just move that along a little bit. Sorry, it's getting a little bit late. Oh, where's the radar gone? They were getting seriously excited because it was doing 138 knots.
Videos recorded by U.S. Navy personnel have added a new layer of evidence to the current national...
Actually, that might be a different video. But anyway, they were getting seriously excited that it was accelerating to 138 knots, and then it disappeared from the radar screen. And they say, don't know whether it's above or below, so it's probably just floated above, isn't it? There's plenty of terrestrial explanations for these things. And I find it extremely hard to believe that you could have that pilot was saying, they were there every day for 2 years, and there is not one photographic image of any of these things. All we see is a little bit of fuzzy infrared stuff. We never ever see an actual visual image of these things. And if they were there every single day for 2 years, you would think that you would be able to get a visual image. You'd be able to get a photograph of one of these things. And if the best they can come up with... I reckon the Russians and the Chinese are having a real laugh at this, I really do. I reckon they'll be having a serious laugh at all this, because they go all over the place, these balloons, all over the ocean. And most of the sightings, remember, are from Navy pilots, which are obviously doing carrying out exercises above the ocean and above the battle groups. It's a real shame we can't get any historical data for the dates involved, but I bet we'd see this sort of activity right above where the Navy exercise was. I'd put money on it. Yeah. I mean, if this was submitted, they go, hey, and the Pentagon's issued another UFO picture. But that's just a loon balloon. That is just a loon balloon. I'm going to scroll down a bit. Google's Project Loon, high altitude balloons spotted over Virginia. There you go. So, I really think this is all a lot of hype for nothing. I really do. I think this is all going to fizzle away. This is going to fizzle away to FA very quickly, because There is nothing to it. There is nothing to it. I reckon these have got to be loon balloons. It's such a good fit, and the chances of it, you know, the odds of it being a loon balloon, oh, you know, extremely more likely than this being anything from E.T. I'd say these are loon balloons. That's probably a deflating, this one here right at the end there's probably a deflating loon balloon on its way back down. So anyway, I'll leave some links below, or I'll leave a link below to the Loon Balloon project, to this video here, and you can take a look at it and see what you think. But when it comes to this sort of thing, I think it's not just the balloons that are loons. So there you go, a bit of a burst of enthusiasm from me with knocking out a few videos over the last couple of days. Probably go quiet now for a little bit, but not quite sure. We'll see how this goes, and we'll see how this pans out. But as always, if you've made it this far through the video, many thanks for watching. Hope you found it interesting or informative or amusing, or any of the above, any or all of the above, and maybe I'll catch you again.